When I polled my viewers on which of 4 random topics would make for a great fighting game, Batman Beyond was the winner, which shows how great of a series it was if fans still want to see more from it around 20 years after it ended, and I agree. With so many original villains and futuristic concepts, I'd like to see this universe get more attention. While we've seen a few modern comic iterations, the character designs from the cartoon would work perfectly in a fighting game. The series is so far removed from the timeline of the Injustice games that it could just be its own thing for a fighting game. And while I love the Injustice series, I think the sci-fi style of Batman Beyond would work better in a faster, more off-the-walls game, like a Marvel vs. Capcom style fighting game. Still, as with my previous What If videos, I'll be creating movesets based on an array of existing fighting games in combination with what these characters did in their series of origin. So let's see if it's a good or bad idea to turn Batman Beyond into a fighting game. For the jack-of-all-trades, easily accessible character, of course it has to be Terry McGinnis, aka Batman Beyond, or just Batman. However, he is slimmer and a lot more agile than your typical Ryu type of character, or Injustice Batman to go with his senior. Because Terry would also be great from a distance with all his tools, if I had to go with an existing character that fits Terry's potential playstyle, I'd say it's Deadpool from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. They're both insanely fast in terms of movement and attacks, have acrobatic motions for mix-ups, and have a myriad of projectiles. Obviously, Terry is not a one-to-one match for Deadpool, but it's a great example of a speedy character that has plenty of up-close and at-a-distance options with short or extensive combos. Up close, Terry would be a brawler, a few fierce punches and kicks, and some backflips that do damage and give him an escape plan. For his projectile game, he'll have batarangs galore. They should have the high speed of Deadpool's guns or Batgirl's batarangs, but with the meter burn aspect of Batman's, where you could spend meter to make them explode. The explosions cause greater hit stun and the ability to detonate the batarangs early, so it helps his approaching game. The ever-popular electric batarangs can be a stronger variant of the regular batarangs that do more damage but have a longer startup time as a trade-off. Electricity was also in his gloves, so that can be a super move that either powers him up or adds a spark to his attacks that increases hit stun on certain moves to extend combos. His cloaking ability could be a counter move since it caught opponents off guard, or it could be a clever teleport. It could also be a standard invisibility move, but we know how lackluster those type of moves turn out in fighting games. His bolo could work like Deadpool's, where it's mid-range and holds the opponent in place for a few seconds. His final most common tools are his gliding wings and rocket boots. They can be used in his dashing to make him like Morgan, where instead of staying grounded during the dash, he can fly in all directions for greater mobility. The rocket boots can also be involved with a super move where he zips all over the stage, so essentially his own maximum spider.
Get ready! Maximum Batman. I'm Batman.
His ultimate move could take a page out of Batman's Injustice supers and hit the opponent with his vehicle. Maybe he can even get a call from Max while he's doing it to give her a cameo, since I don't see her making this roster with her lack of fighting experience. Blight would be a pure projectile zoner. He wasn't much of a physical fighter since he was just a corrupt businessman with a chemical mutation, but he knew his strengths, being nuclear green fire. He can throw fireballs in the air and straight ahead and all over the place. His super moves could be a massive stream of fire and a massive ball of fire. How creative. I guess the Skullfire face wouldn't be his only similarity with Dormammu. Since he goes all nuclear explosion towards the end of his arc, I'd also give him a fire explosion super move that surrounds him and burns anything near him. Related to that, he should have a proximity damage move that allows him to whittle away his opponent's health if they are near him when it's active, like Scorpion lighting himself on fire in Injustice. And to continue comparing him to guys with their heads on fire, he could have a move like when Scorpion grabs his opponent, lights them on fire, and throws them across the screen, since that's one of the few hand-to-hand attacks that Blight did. Plus, it's a good tool to help him set up for more projectiles, since it gets his opponent away from him if they were to come too close where his zoning would become ineffective. Outside of all that, his intro animation has to be where his skin makeup breaks off to reveal his radioactive appearance. It's like when a character powers up before a match, only Blight's just getting angry. Ink would be a combination of the amorphous characters and stretchy characters in fighting games. I envision some of her attacks to work like 12 from Street Fighter, where she goes all noodle arms and makes herself a giant hitbox. She can also be like Arakune from BlazBlue, where her normal moves make her hitboxes get all weird as she liquefies her body and transforms into shapes and stuff. And then you'll have some general stretchy attacks that allow her to fight from full screen. However, you need to add some grappling aspects to her stretching since she loved to entangle Terry in her body. I'd say something like Super Skrull's Elastic Slam, since swinging and slamming into the ground was her specialty. I'd even add an enhanced move or super move command grab based on that weird scene where she starts going into Terry's mouth for no explainable reason. Is she trying to suffocate him? Is this like a Majin Buu attack where she's going inside of him to make him expand and explode? Anyway, she'll have this as a strong command grab that also temporarily poisons the opponent, since that move seems like it should have some type of after effect, or at least an aftertaste. For her tentacle noodle arms, I think they could transform into shapes and also work like Super Skrull. Some of the more basic shapes can just be pokes in this scenario, while something like the tentacle with the hammer at the end could work like Skrull's rolling hook. This move turns his stretchy hand to stone for a hard knockdown, only to replace the stone with a hammer for Ink's version. Super move options can include her throwing spikes that'll work like those supers that fire projectiles in rapid succession, and for her ultimate super, she can engulf her opponent entirely. Since her liquid body crawls around creepily before trying to absorb you, I think this move would be like Shuma Gorath's Chaos Dimension, where she completely surrounds the opponent for impending doom.
Combo KO! You win!
Spellbinder was a master manipulator and less of a fighter, so he'll take a page out of some of the more scientific fighting game characters' handbooks.
I defeated a raccoon! Science!
His main gimmick will be his hypnotic orb. In the show, Spellbinder would cause people to hallucinate, either seeing their worst fears or greatest dreams. To show the mental effects of his tricks in a fighting game setting, they could work like the syringes that Valentine uses in Skullgirls, where after getting hit by those attacks, they would have a negative lasting effect on the opponent. I'd specifically look at her effect that causes input lag for her opponent when active. That feels like the best representation of whoever he's fighting being affected by his tricks, since Batman would generally fight enemies that he was hallucinating to be there instead of Spellbinder himself. The input lag could signify the mental imaginary foe that Spellbinder creates. The syringes that poison and cause more hit stun on the opponent also feel like good effects from his mind control, and give him a Quan Chi-esque hypnotize move to stun his opponent while you're at it. He should also have a buffing move that makes his regular attacks more powerful based on how often the buffing move hits his opponent. It would work like MODOK's Analyze cubes, where they power up his own attacks the more they make contact with the opponent. For context, in the show, Spellbinder just used brute force attacks with rocks and branches and other stuff, which was mainly successful because his victims were under the effects of his mind games, so it would make sense for him to be a weaker character who can buff his damage with these other effects. Oh, and give him a big ass laser, since I could see him pulling one out just cuz.
You win! Now that's mind over matter!
Curare, the silent assassin thief, would be a rushdown-oriented character. She'd play like a speedy ninja, but with some samurai attacks thrown in. More like a traditional samurai in the vein of Mitsurugi or Baiken, where the slashes and kicks would be swift with touches of style in between. However, she would also have agile flips and speed to go with how she attacked and evaded in the series. She even managed to pull out some kunai, so maybe describing her as a Buki with a sword would be more fitting. Besides for slashing, she uses the sword to deflect projectiles a lot, so a projectile counter when she swings her sword should be in her arsenal too. Beyond the standard ninja playstyle, she had a few stun moves, particularly in the form of gas and light. She has some sort of tear gas bombs that could be a projectile that keeps the opponent still for a short period of time as they cough and try to fan it away. And her sword has this blinding light power, because of course it can do everything, which could be an up-close stun move, so she has stun options from anywhere on the stage. The light from the sword can also be related to her ultimate move, since she shined it right in Batman's eyes at one point, and by the time he could see a bit, she was right in front of him for the attack. Based on how it looked in the cartoon, it would be one of those super moves that shows the first-person perspective of the opponent. Those always turn out cool.
Tell me where it hurts.
Shriek is a sound-based villain, so time to pull out the Sindel references. His sound can stun you and just push you away from the sheer force of it, so those are two obvious attacks. In the show, he could also adjust the power of the sound, so he should have a gimmick where he can charge up the sound for longer stun times or doing damage in addition to the stun, similar to what Sindel and Black Canary could do. I'd even add if he charges up the sound, some of his basic moves can have increased hit stun to reflect how unbearable the sound is up close. This would be like the sound stun mechanic of Big Band's moves in Skullgirls. Basically, when used correctly, certain loud attacks that he does make the opponent take longer to recover after being hit by them. I'd say one of those attacks should be like Sailor Moon's Sonic Headbutt, since that move was surprisingly brutal for the Moon Princess and really slowed down the recovery of the opponent in the Sailor Moon fighting game. Shriek's physical attacks were nothing special otherwise, but at least he could fend off a bit for himself up close if needed. That metal suit could still hurt if it hit you in the head. Since he could also take away sound from the whole room, I could see him having a super move that hits everywhere on the stage for a second, forcing the opponent to block regardless of where they are. Taking away sound could also work like one of those field-changing super moves in Darkstalkers that gave the user super armor or something similar. An ultimate attack should be something cinematic that involves him blasting sound point blank at the opponent. You gotta maximize your strengths.
Sindel wins. Fatality.
Mad Stan is the perfect grappler. He may have been focused on bombing establishments that he hated, but he knew how to wrestle successfully. For traditional techniques, he's done pile drivers, running grabs, spinning the opponent by the legs, the works, all of which are staples of fighting game grapplers. Batman even had a hard time getting up when on the receiving end of these attacks and had trouble getting through Stan's body armor at first, both of which fit the attributes of hard knockdowns and armor being prominent on command grabs for big body grapplers. But going beyond the grappler tropes, he would have a gimmick involving his rage. They say he becomes more unstoppable as his rage builds up, so his rage could work in a few different ways. It could build as he does attacks, like how Jax's arms heat up in Mortal Kombat 11, so the more he uses enraging attacks, the stronger his attacks get, and maybe he'll get access to new ones briefly. It could also be like Hakan's Oil, where the rage is a power-up move that temporarily increases his strength and range. Or it could be like Solomon Grundy, where him chaining grabs can boost his rage for attack or defense boosts. Regardless, he just keeps going with his grabs in the show, so I feel like a Tekken King style wrestling moveset should be his base style where he chains his attacks together. Since artillery is also his gimmick, I think he should take another page from Jax's book and get some gun projectiles. However, since he seems to have limited ammo and bombs in the show, he should only be able to use them a few times, like how Igus has a set amount of bullets in Persona 4 Arena. His guns and bombs could be more of a last resort move if you need to find a way to approach from a distance without worrying about taking damage from using armored attacks. The bigger explosions can be saved for his super moves, probably something cinematic with his giant bombs or grenades for an ultimate attack. The Royal Flush Gang would be like Captain Ginyu in Dragon Ball FighterZ, with King as the main fighter and the other card-themed family members as his assists. I seem to like having these types of team-up characters in these videos. King himself would have a limited moveset that is maximized when he calls his team in. His own moves would revolve around his sword and his various types of throwing cards. The sword can work like, well, a sword, probably just like Scorpion's in Mortal Kombat 9, where it was involved in some of his general attacks and combo strings. It can also fire a laser, so perhaps it can be an extra projectile for him that aims high, and I say extra since he'll have a lot of projectiles. He threw cards anytime he was in danger. I don't think they were ever just basic projectiles either. They had knockout gas, tied up people, were bombs, blades, and even had traps to disable technology. To go over how each card would work, the knockout gas card could be a stun move like Curare's, the rope card could be a trap that holds the enemy in place place if they go near it, like Trish's traps in Marvel vs. Capcom. The bomb card could either be a short-range projectile to pop up the opponent, or a super move that goes off after a set period of time. The blade card could be like Oswald's cards in King of Fighters. And finally, the disabling card could be like Noob Saibot's Ghost Ball that prevents blocking, or another trap that prevents an opponent from doing certain moves or jumping when they get hit by it. Now his family could add more tricks by swooping in and using their signature fighting styles with 2 unique moves each. Queen could fly by to zap the opponent point blank with her scepter and fire a fast blast. Jack could throw his sai at an angle and fly by to slash the opponent. Ace could run forward at full speed to ram the opponent and grab them from the back to open up combo opportunities. And finally, 10 could rush forward with a couple of acrobatic attacks. She was more prominent for dramatic plot reasons rather than crazy fighting techniques, so she's a bit more grounded. Using all these tools will make full screen against King a bullet hell. The ultimate attack would be the Royal Flush Gang jumping on their card hoverboards and going for a team-up all-out assault. Who doesn't love when we have a little family bonding in fighting games? Stalker is a jungle-style hunter in the futuristic city. He has a bit of technology at his disposal, but he's mostly about old-fashioned fighting with his retractable bow. I guess that would make his main fighting style be 1 part Keelik from Soul Calibur, but also 1 part Jade from Mortal Kombat, since he still fights hand-to-hand with the bow coming out when he feels it's necessary. The bow can be thrown too, so add in a Shao Kahn spear projectile. His heat-seeking eye made hiding impossible, so I could see this being a move that makes him unblockable for a period of time, but it would have a lot of startup like many unblockable attacks in fighting games. The man also set a lot of traps, most of which I could see as super moves. A non-super move trap could be his giant metal tubes that hold you in place if you go near them, but the other ones have super move potential. His leg lock trap could be like Rocket Raccoon's big trap super move that launches the opponent when touched, only it could temporarily slow down the foe instead if activated. It was impossible to walk in that thing. His dart launcher trap could rapid fire projectiles in a super move fashion when activated, causing massive damage or at least forcing his opponent to block so Stalker can come in for the kill. Finally, there's his Pitfall Trap, which could work like Rolento's Take No Prisoners, where a tripwire is activated low on a standing opponent, or Squiggly's Daisy Pusher, which activates right below a grounded opponent in front of her. Preferably the latter, since they both involve trap holes that cause the opponent to fall from an elevation, and I've always found that super move to look really cool.
Watch your feet!
I hardly knew you. She's not her father, I'll give her that.
The Jokers used to be a disappointment to me. I thought they would be a bigger threat, but they were just a bunch of street thugs, which I appreciate now since it's fitting that no one can truly live up to the real Joker's legacy. As you would expect, the best group of Jokers was from the Joker's own crew in Return of the Joker. The one I'd make playable to represent the Joker's brand are the twins Dee Dee. Since there are no real differences between them, one of them will be the main fighter and the other will come in for team-up attacks and switch places with the twin fighting for visual effect. To an extent, they're going to be an acrobatic Noob Saibot that's focused on rushdown over projectiles. She would have amazing pressure when used correctly, doing cartwheels and similar attacks that are fast and can pop up the opponent for some combo opportunities. The second twin could come in with flips, cartwheels, and grabs that set up for mix-ups or extended combos. It would sort of be like Harley Quinn's stance in Injustice that goes into a cartwheel for combos, low kick for knockdown, or guns to catch the opponent off guard, which is fitting since Dee Dee are Harley's grandchildren. Super moves would also utilize both twins. One of the supers could be like Morgan's Mirror Super, where the other twin mimics the main twin's moves on the other side of the opponent for extra pressure. The twins could pull out their taser or electric whips for a ranged command grab super, like MODOK's Killer Illumination, where it leaves the opponent in a hard knockdown state so he could OTG attack them for extended combos. OTG means you can hit the opponent on the ground after they're knocked down by an attack, so I specifically want the hard knockdown since Dee Dee were great at kicking Batman while he was on the ground after getting zapped. I like that Mr. Freeze returned in Batman Beyond, and hey, Mr. Freeze was already in a fighting game. Well, an alternate skin for Captain Cold in a fighting game, but it was a good moveset, so let's give him that moveset again. This game is pretty villain heavy, so let's add some more heroes. Viewer Simba Cartoon fan suggested Old Man Static, which is a great idea. He appeared in some of the Batman Beyond Justice League Static Shock crossovers, so with his mastery of electricity in the future, he should be a combination of Storm and Raiden. He'll have the commanding electric attacks of Raiden that throw the opponent in all directions, and the flight-based electricity that both of them have with the electric fly. Static can just do a charge while flying on his metal plate. I also suggested on my Injustice 2 list that he should be able to summon debris to use as projectiles and shields. He was able to manipulate metal objects with electricity, so it would be like that one Oro super move. For another super move, meh, give him Lightning Storm. A giant ball of electricity would suit him well. The future Justice League had a bunch of great options, but we didn't see too much of them for an extensive moveset for each, though the two that had the most potential to me were Aquagirl and Warhawk. Aquagirl could be a good zoner who kinda plays like Storm if you replaced all the wind and ice attacks in her moveset with water. All those tornadoes are now whirlpools. Warhawk could be a brawler with Firebrand aspects involving his flight and retractable claws. And Superman? I don't know, maybe a final boss where he's controlled by Starro. Old Man Bruce Wayne feels like he should be a secret unlockable fighter since you never expect him to fight. His main way of fighting would be with his cane. He can do a bunch of fancy cane techniques that give him a great poking game and probably some short but hard-hitting combos. He was never one for complex maneuvers in his old age, but he was always good for a few quick cane whacks. It could kinda be like Boraicho's Bartitsu variation with the cane, only not disgusting. He could also snap his fingers to bring out his dog Ace as an assist, probably like one of those little buddy super moves that reacts to certain inputs to fight in tandem with the main fighter. Ace could charge at the opponent and bite them to hold them in place for some of his moves. His ultimate move could be him getting in that super bat mech that he used to fight Ink. It could give him a temporary boosted moveset and lots of invincible armor. One of his disadvantages could be lower health, since he generally couldn't fight for long. Viewers Brandon and Jellofant also suggested him using some Batcave gadgets and a super move where he pulls out the high water pressure hose, and I say that's a great idea, but only if he wears the gray ghost hat and glasses while doing that last one. So with the unlockable fighter being the last character we learn about in fighting games, I think this would be a good stopping point. There are still plenty of characters in this series I did not get a chance to discuss, some of which were mentioned by viewers, so maybe there could be a part 2 someday. Now, what did you think? What did you like about my potential movesets, and what would you add? What characters would you also want to see in this hypothetical Batman Beyond fighting game? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.